Welcome everyone to our Inspiring Thoughts podcast today. So we've got our special guest, Sandra Farquharson, who is the current Assistant Director for People and OD for the Royal Borough of Kingston-upon-Thames. So first of all, Happy New Year, Sandra, and great to have you part of the podcast today. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Stephen. Happy New Year to you too and all the listeners.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. So first of all, Sandra, I think you've got some good news. So I think you've just recently going to be moving from your assistant director post. Would you just tell the viewers what role you're moving on to?
Yeah, so I've recently been appointed to the director of HR and organisational development at the London Borough of Hackney. So I'll start that role in March, the 1st of March, which I'm really looking forward to. I had a brilliant time and experience at Kingston. It's been amazing. I think this is now just kind of moving on to do a little bit more. So I'm really looking forward to that too.
No, that's wonderful. And I can see in your eyes and your face that you're looking forward to it. It's an exciting opportunity and that natural progression to move forward, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think it's not necessarily just about progression. I think it's it's an opportunity to do more of what I already do. I would say that this level of kind of joy, if you like, is there for
Yeah.
me all the time here at Kingston.
Yeah.
So I just want to, it's always been the same, to be honest,
Yeah.
Stephen.
Yeah.
I actually just love what I do.
Yeah. And
It's
that
good.
I know we connected through LinkedIn, but that really shows from your LinkedIn posts, your comments, just kind of your real passion that I've noticed and seen to come through. So I really appreciate that. So
Thank
would
you.
you kind of just before we go into kind of Sandra's had some questions beforehand to kind of prep, etc. But would you just tell kind of our listeners your kind of your career history, what you've gone through to where you've got to now? That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, sure. So I am definitely one of those from the bottom up type
Yeah,
people.
good.
I started my career in 1988 in the Department of Social Security, which no longer exists. And I was there as an admin assistant, as a very young girl, kind of running around getting files and things like
Yeah,
that for kind of claimants and things. And we had a really nice team of youngsters, if you like, kind of join and
yeah,
working together at that time. I went on from there to actually take on a role as an administrative officer at what was then the Department of Environment and Crown suppliers. So they used to have suppliers of furniture and materials and things like that that were from the Crown, and that's where I
yeah,
worked for probably about another year or two. I then joined the Ministry of Defence and a territorial army centre in Manchester. So if you can't tell from the accent, I'm from
yeah.
Manchester. It's going nowhere, Stephen. That accent is here to stay. Very proud of it. So yeah, although I'm
Yeah,
in the south, it won't be changing anytime
yeah,
soon. And I actually, from the Territorial Army Centre, I was there for 11 years. I had really great encouragement from what we called PASOs. They were the permanent administrative staff officers of the army who kind of came and led some of the smaller units as part of their posting. And I was encouraged to actually apply for a talent program that was going on at the time in the MOD, and I did that. Um, and I got through, and I started a role then at Headquarters Recruiting Group in Uphaven in the southwest, and that's how I moved really down to the southwest. That was several years ago. I then went on to another talent program that was MOD wide. I then went to work at RAF Personnel Training Command in Gloucester. I then went from there to the Headquarters Army Training Division, which was a kind of like the larger
yeah,
part of where I'd kind of started off. There were some amazing experiences there. I was part of developing the first um, army and military led harassment and bullying training for welfare officers that was following deaths at Deep Cut. So, really
yeah,
impactful pieces of work there. I went on to Headquarters Defence Equipment and Support before leaving from the Ministry of Defence as part of a spend review, kind of put my hat in the ring. They didn't actually want me to leave, which was nice, but I think it was time. And then I went on to Bristol City Council for nearly 5 years, and then a couple of years more recently at Guernsey Public Authority. And then the Royal Borough of Kingston upon Thames, and then obviously we've now got my next part of the journey, which will be at London Borough of Hackney in March.
Which is wonderful. And I really love the bit about the varied career of your movement, and also moving as well, because people, to kind of benefit in their careers, etc. And a couple of key things, because the podcast today, we're looking about authentic leadership and what it really means to Sandra. But I just picked up a couple of things there. Encouragement. I heard about kind of, I think they were called, what did you say, passos, that encourage you to do, kind of move forward. I really love, because we do need people to encourage us.
Absolutely.
And then I also heard those talent programs that you went on as well, and put yourself forward, because you do need to put yourself forward and come out your comfort zone from that perspective. So going forward, from looking at our authentic leadership position, when you were growing up, who inspired you?
So definitely my parents were a massive inspiration. I think that their level of kindness and care was really impactful. They were always joyful, always kind of, my mum, as well as being a nurse, she was a nurse who worked nights from ever since she arrived here in her 20s for the NHS. She would also be, baking cakes for the teachers. She sewed, she did everything. Amazing. And when I say did, she's still around, but she's 88 now, so none of those things are happening anymore. And my dad, just they were just such kind people, and very much, embracing of the community and things like that. They taught care in their own way, and I think it's one of the fundamental principles that I always have is about people and us all kind of belonging.
Yes.
Is for that ping. So it's that sense of belonging, I think, that they've always kind of shared. The other person was my uncle Chris. He came here actually on the Empire Windrush. He was an RAF soldier, was demobbed and kind of came back, and he was somebody who he was very suave, is what I would say, and he'd kind of walk in at Christmas time and say things like, so what are you guys doing with yourselves? And so we'd be kind of standing to attention. Not quite. He wasn't strict, but he was just so charming. And he went on to be, the first Black Justice of the Peace for Manchester. He was I think his inspiration around the military was always why I thought, oh, I used to go on the bus past that Territorial Army Centre that I joined as a school child and think, oh, I wonder what they do there. And I ended up working there and spent 22 years in the Ministry of Defence. And I think some of that has definitely come from, my amazing Uncle Chris. He used to come in, Stephen, with this thin cigar, and always remember it. And he was just like, oh, here he is, it's Uncle Chris, sort of thing. So, it wasn't necessarily, like famous icons or anything like that. It was about the warmth of the people that was very close to me.
Yeah. And the bit I was smiling as you were talking then, because you were talking about your parents, that my true inspiration is my mother. So, and people always think it's got to be a sportsman or a famous person, etc. But my mum taught me a very good phrase of, it's not the problem that's the problem, it's how you solve the problem. And I've always looked at in my career thinking, we're going to come up against problems and issues, but how we solve them. So I was just smiling and reminiscing there, kind of my childhood and upward bringing as well. So really great. So thank you ever so much for sharing. I really, really appreciate it. So moving on to yourself, how would you describe Sandra's leadership style? How would you describe your style?
So I think it's definitely very down to earth.
Yeah,
I think definitely in terms of style, I think I always approach everything, particularly about people, from a point of there's openness, definitely curiosity,
yeah,
inquisitiveness, and I think that belief in empowerment and distributed leadership is very strong for me. I do feel that, and I've not only experienced it for myself, but I've actually helped to support the delivery of that in talent programs that I have personally kind of developed and led.
yeah,
It's that thing where, when you kind of instill a belief
yeah,
in somebody that actually you've probably got the answers yourself. You've got the
yeah,
talent. What is it? Where is it? How do
yeah,
we apply that? Because the one thing I can say, it's been my experience, is I've just gone for it. And
yeah,
not quite really, if I'm honest, even had a plan.
yeah,
It was just a case of there was something about the desire to do
yeah,
more, that I placed myself in positions
yeah,
where I wasn't I wasn't really quite sure how it was going to work out. I thought, why not give
yeah,
it a go? And
yeah.
here I am.
Yeah, yeah. And I just love picking up on a couple of points there towards the end about putting yourself out there to do something. Um, because a lot of people listening today would be going, well, my comfort zone, what did these people exist of, gone and done bigger leadership jobs? How did you feel coming out your comfort zone, doing, putting yourself in that position? How did you feel?
So there's been one thing that's been really impactful in that approach around putting myself in that position of discomfort,
Yeah,
and that's my boys.
really.
So I've got two boys, majority of the time, that I've been a single parent.
Yeah,
So they have been my fuel.
really.
That kind of, what, we just need to see how this goes.
Yeah,
And that's always been a great inspiration. They've been brilliant. I've
yeah,
been so lucky.
yeah.
I moved away from a very large family, Stephen. I'm one of seven, and I'm the youngest of seven too, although I'm the boss.
I was
Uh,
going to say, I think I've picked that up, Sandra.
in a very supportive and
Yeah,
loving way, Stephen, but I'm the
yeah,
boss. That let's treat each
yeah,
other well.
yeah,
Um, I think they've always, because I've kind of I put myself out on a limb a little bit,
yeah,
and I couldn't allow that to not
yeah,
work for them.
yeah,
So to a lot of degree, that has been part of the fuel too.
yeah, yeah.
So that
And,
that that plays a major part.
and you just summed it up there. The word that was going through my head was like fuel. We all need that to get us to take that jump, to move us in that different direction, or something new for us, or move home for career, etc. There's got to be a inner belief or fuel of why we want to do it. So and with your two boys, I can see how proud you were about kind of talking about your boys, kind of behind the background as fuel you on. But I think we all need something, don't we, in kind of how we kind of in our careers.
Yeah, and I do think it's probably different things for different people. The one thing I can say about my leadership style, it's never been about the title of the role.
Yeah,
And if you're coming from that position, see, each to their own,
yeah,
but I don't know whether that fuel just runs out.
yes,
The fuel that I feel I have, you might get a bit exhausted every now and then, but there's something that's going to say, come on, let's go.
yeah,
And I think there's something amazing about having that
yeah,
within you, that kind of says, because it's not about me. I can definitely thrive and survive and stuff without the title. I've
yeah,
certainly, had to kind of, there was a period of time, sort of around about sort of 2020, sort of around about sort of 2010, 2008 to 2010, when I kind of had to say, you need to kind of step out here a little bit now,
yeah,
and there's a bit of me that was kind of looking up, looking even to the side and saying,
yeah,
oh, but that's not me.
yeah,
And I actually had to challenge myself slightly
yeah,
in that thinking, and I actually did that during an NLP and a master NLP practitioner's course.
yeah,
So I am a master NLP
yeah,
practitioner. So I consider myself somewhat a coach myself,
Yeah.
but it really gave me an opportunity to question where I'm at. And
Yes.
there's a natural thing that there's some it feels slightly natural, but actually I was sort of saying, oh yeah, but that's not me.
Yeah.
And then I worked on that, not deliberately. I think it just
Yeah.
materialized where I
Yeah.
think at the end of that it was a case of actually it's you if you want it to be.
Yes.
Changed a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was also a similar thing that I went through in my mid 30s. You could probably call it comfortable in your own skin,
Yeah,
but I stopped being what I call imposter syndrome. So I worked in a bank for 26 years and I actually become Stephen again. And I loved it. And it
yeah.
stretched me and developed me. And actually, people could see the true, genuine, best version of myself at work. And I can see that with yourself. Then, um, once you get to that place, it's a great place to be, isn't it?
Oh, it's the most, it's the most special place to be. I think, people talk about it, especially a lot at the moment, talk about vulnerabilities and things like that. I mean, I don't see it as being necessarily a vulnerability. I always feel this is the only me I've got. So we
Yes.
kind of, you either like it or you don't.
Yeah.
And thankfully, a lot of people do like it.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
it's not because everything and every day is, something to smile about. The serious stuff that goes on, I
Yeah.
have to lead some, quite difficult circumstances. And there's times when, that can be difficult.
Yeah.
But it's part of the profession, it's part of the whole piece of
Yes.
what we do. So, but I don't forget the things about what's the outcome, what
Yeah.
is it we're trying to achieve here? And most of the time, again, that's fuel because
Yeah.
we're trying to find a place of certainly at least harmony amongst people, in my
Yes.
view.
Yeah, and it's a lovely phrase then about harmony amongst people, isn't it? Because I've just got an inner belief that people come to work to do a good job. That's just
Absolutely.
my inner belief. I think 90% of the population want to do a good job. They're nice people. There's 10% odd, what I call the naughty people. So I might get told off for saying it, but sometimes it's where they're in the wrong job, how they've been treated, those kind of things. So I think that harmony is such a lovely word. Really, really nice word to say. So if you were to look in people you've worked with or that, what would you say the best traits of leadership you've picked up over the years of your experience?
So I think obviously one of the key ones for me is that kind of opening, listening,
Yeah,
supportive. I think you need to be connected. You kind of
yeah,
need to love what you do.
yeah,
I'm not saying it's a must. I think there's plenty of people who have different drivers and they get a sense of achievement from that. I'm not sure though, and that's just from a course of being older now whether you don't run out of steam if that's
yeah,
your approach that you use, but it's never been mine. I've never felt I've had to do that. I felt very strongly about my own identity, so I've not been prepared
yes,
to do that.
yeah,
I think in terms of the style, um, challenging the status quo,
yeah,
being open to that, and also, if I'm honest, and I'm always honest, you'd be open to being wrong.
yeah,
Curiosity.
yeah,
Because, there's so much creativity that will exist amongst you, and it's not always aligned to this role, this is what you do,
yeah,
so you to that person.
yeah,
I've found some real talent across
yeah,
services and with talents that you would never believe. So I
yeah,
think being open
yeah,
to that to number one, not knowing it all, because that's what you've got
yes,
a team for, if you all come
yeah,
together, and importantly, to kind of enable and empower creativity and transformation.
yeah. And I just picking up on a couple of words there around um, the openness, the ability to listen. So I was always taught when I was younger, two ears, one mouth, use them. So I love that. I also like the bit about curiosity. because I think curiosity is key. And I think in the world we live in, we need to be curious to understand people and get to know people. And also, I love the bit there where you said you can get things wrong. It's okay to get things wrong, isn't it? As long as you've tried and you do it with best ability, then actually you learn from it. And I think there was a phrase that was given to me was the word fail. So first attempt in learning. So as an acronym. So it's just so refreshing to hear those kind of what I call genuine human phrases that
Yeah.
people combine or kind of relate to, if that makes sense.
I think if you lack the courage to fail, your behaviours are potentially not going to be the best as a
Yeah,
leader.
yeah,
Because there'll be a lot of fear-based actions. So, it's about really enabling to me a platform where, colleagues, you're all working together as a team, feel that they can be creative. And, let's look at it as iterative, if you like.
yes,
We're not always going to get it right first time, but if
yeah,
we don't try something different, we just keep pressing repeat on something we've already had.
yeah,
And that's the bit that I would be. It there's not that much energy in
yes,
reproducing or relabeling something that's already been done. I
yeah,
think the best thing about being in these positions is people coming together to create something totally different, totally new and
yes,
transformative. And I think I've been lucky
yeah,
to have been part of a lot of that, which is
yeah,
good.
which is fantastic, isn't it? And I just to pick up again that transformative, the different ideas, different suggestions, because things evolve, don't they? With you
Absolutely.
get, and I think if you stand still, you get left behind. Whereas
Yeah.
actually, if you keep evolving, you make mistakes, you get things wrong, but you keep moving forward, that's a great place to be. That's just a,
Absolutely. One of the key things I think Stephen is asking, why do we do that?
yeah,
Why? And I think sometimes when you're in an organization or when you start in an organization where that flow of creativity has not yet been established, because you'll tend to find a lot of people explaining reasons why no, but reasons
yes,
why not. And actually, it's better. You kind of need to take, for me, my leadership style is to take the stance of, but why not?
yeah,
Because I'd like to understand that bit more.
yeah,
Not a reason not to do something, but why wouldn't we do it?
yeah,
And then have that exploration. But again, it's
yeah,
about how you have that conversation. I think,
correct.
Steve,
Yeah,
that same openness and supportiveness that I
yeah,
think is really important.
yeah. And if you look at kind of with yourself over your years, how would your job's pressurized, it is stressful, those kind of things. How do you overcome pressure and stress for you? How does that work for you?
So I'm a very firm believer of kind of stepping back and reflecting.
Yeah,
I think that a coach certainly helps to do that,
yeah,
because it kind of sets out some time,
yeah,
for you to kind of do that stepping back. I don't think it's essential, but sometimes, there can be a lot of activity taking place. It's a lot, very pressured. We've had things like the pandemic, um, and there is something about being able to take a breath, kind of do a bit of reflection, and consider, what is this about?
yeah,
There's a lot of people who may go to some really complicated and complex models and things like that. And whilst I think they all have its place, it can be a little bit too script
yes,
in its methodology. And for me, there are sometimes just some really basic, simple things that I know.
yeah,
I can be at that stage where I need to step back here,
yeah,
because it feels a little too muddled and it feels a little bit too heavy, maybe even
yeah,
intense. And I think, stepping back to ask that simple question, what is this about, and what is it? What's really at the core, and what's needed? Sometimes what's
yeah,
actually needed is a break,
yeah,
a
yeah,
rest, a kind
yes,
exactly that, putting it down and having a little bit of space to kind of almost do nothing for a minute,
yeah, yeah,
um, longer, and then look at it again. I think you find, um, the answer almost comes to you rather than you go
Yes.
seeking it. The more you
Yeah.
seek, the more it tends to be avoided. It
Yes.
avoids,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
minute you're prepared to let it go,
Yeah.
I think that's when some of the answers start to come through. But a coach
Yeah.
does help when to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And it's what the bit for me when I speak to so many people through my 30 years in leadership,
Mhm.
people try and run 100 mile an hour and they keep going, they keep going, they keep going, and I'll fight my way through this problem. And I just think it's so refreshing again that we all need a pit stop, we all need a breather to do some good reflections and actually go, now can I see the wood through the trees? And I just love the bit there because I was smiling again. The answer just sometimes hits us, doesn't it? From nowhere we go, well, that's really obvious, wasn't it? Why could I not see it? Because we're in the thick of it, we can't see it. So I think, and I know people that will use loads of different models and different techniques, but just having the breather, I call it a cup of tea breather. Take a cup of tea, let's really breathe and think about what you like to do, or just ignore it for a bit. The answers will start to come clear. If that makes sense.
Absolutely, and I think the skill, if you want to create that in terms of a skill, I think it's to do that on more regular and in a more regular pattern. Not
Yeah,
not necessarily scheduling it, but make it part of how you do your work. And then
yeah,
when there is a level of increased intensity, you will tend to deal with it better. You'll snap back
yeah,
quicker.
yeah,
um, and I think that that would always be helpful.
yeah,
So I would say don't wait until things build up. You want
yes,
to kind of, be able
yeah,
to have a certain approach that you know what works for you, and it might be different
yeah,
things for different people. I mean, I
yeah,
run, I meditate, I do other things as well. Even
yeah,
took up sewing a couple of years ago for a little bit of a
yeah,
just do something different. And
yeah,
drawing,
yeah.
again, drawing,
But it's just to pick it up there, just good to do something different.
totally
So,
different. Yeah,
like with me, I like cycling, I like fresh air, I like walking, and my mind can just wander, but it's nice wandering, if that makes sense. It's not kind of
yeah,
heavy workload. So I think that's a really, really good point. And I think the bit which you just said there, people have got to find the thing that works for them. One
absolutely.
size doesn't fit all. And I just would say to like our listeners today, find what works for you, that resilience, etc. Read books, look at kind of stuff on YouTube, wherever but find what works for you. And when you found it, it's worth its weight in gold. Really is.
And to me, the real benefit and worth its weight in gold is that something is not work related. So I read
Yes.
books as well, and I'll specifically look for a fiction book.
Yeah.
It's kind of totally different. I might be looking for humor. There'll be things that I just decide I'm not watching on the TV, Stephen,
Yeah.
because everything just feels a little bit too heavy.
Yeah.
For me, the key has been something totally different. I don't want
Yeah.
more of. I don't want to delve into
Yeah.
another analysis of myself necessarily.
Yes. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
you want to have some fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And fun's good, isn't it? Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. I love fun. I think it's brilliant. So, what would you, going back in time, if you had your time again, what three tips would you give your younger self? And it doesn't have to be three, but what tips would you give if you're going into leadership or authentic leadership? What tips would you give yourself?
So, first of all, I'd say if I knew the whole journey in advance, I might not have taken it. So, so,
Yeah,
so I would say, trust that things will unfold.
yeah,
And for me, there's also that thing about what is for you will not pass you by.
yeah,
I do believe that yes, there's a feeling of delays or we haven't quite got that and whatever, and I just don't. Younger years are for exploration, and delays are not denials. There is something to learn from even the most challenging of experiences that will play a part later on.
yeah,
You probably don't think it at the time,
yeah,
but that's certainly been my experience that, they're greatly, there's
yeah,
leadership at all levels. It isn't a particular level. It's
yeah,
there an opportunity for us at every single level to me.
yeah. Yeah, and it's the really good thing about things will happen, and then also if things go wrong, that's a learning. And if I go back, some of my best learning are where things have gone wrong, and you go, actually, next time I do it bigger and better than before. So, just for anyone, if you're going back in time, things are going to go wrong, but learn from them. Really grab hold of them, isn't it?
Yeah, and in a way, you probably won't think it at the time, but it is a gift. You
Yeah.
just don't. Just a gift that kind of gives a bit later on, or maybe a lot
Yes.
later, but it is a gift.
Yeah. Yeah. And I say to people, you have like your sports bag or toolkit or your kit bag. It will be in there somewhere. You'll pull it out later on and go, "Oh, perfect. That's when I need it." If that makes sense.
And not only that, I think what that also proves, Stephen, is you survived, doesn't
Yes.
it? If you've
Yeah.
got the bag and you're going to go and dip into the bag, that means
Yeah.
you survived. And it
Yeah.
can also give you the fuel that whatever the challenge is at the time,
Yeah.
you'll probably survive that one too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, fantastic. I really appreciate that. So, if you're looking at working with your colleagues, so as an assistant director now going into your director position, how do you support your colleagues daily, weekly, monthly? What's kind of your style with supporting colleagues?
So I mentor quite a lot of people, probably around
Yeah,
five.
yeah, cool.
At the moment, sort of regular kind of monthly
Yeah,
meetings, talking about them and their careers, and they're all at different levels. There's no particular
yeah,
kind of script or requirement from them to kind of be at a certain level or wanting a certain
yeah,
thing, have conversations. Um, I attend all of the kind of people focused networks within the organisation. Some of those are
yeah,
external, along with sort of other London Council
yeah.
colleagues. I'm an active participant
Yes,
in what are we doing as people, and
yeah,
how are we feeling supportive? What is it that you need? And again, from that perspective that I don't know it all, but
yes,
I want to hear it, and I want to know how we can
yeah,
do things differently and better. So that's one of the most fundamental. You can always guarantee to, from a very personal perspective, that I know almost all my colleagues. I know them and I know them well. And if there's something wrong or I hear about something
yeah,
that doesn't sound quite right, I'll be in a little bit what we call a hangout, kind of say,
yeah,
can we have a word? Let's have a
yeah,
chat. How's
yeah,
it going? How are you? That sort of thing. So
yeah,
that's one of my, again, it's not required necessarily,
yeah,
but kind of want to know. I never, don't forget, as I said, Stephen, I started at the most junior grade in
yeah,
the service. I haven't forgotten that. I know
yeah,
exactly how it feels to be rising up the rank and
yeah,
all these different
yeah,
places. And I think, the best thing about being where I am is that opportunity to pay it forward. I
yeah,
haven't forgotten any of that
yeah.
at
And
all.
I just on those bits as well. So I started off in the bank as a cashier. So and then moved through the bank ranks, and then moved into my own business later on. And I've never forgotten when you go up, the role where you come from and kind of who you've looked after and who you've spoken to. And the basic fundamental, the best managers I've worked with, and you've just summed it up perfectly, they would check up on you to see how you are if you weren't yourself, or they'd say, "How are you? And should we have a?" You said hang out. I used to say, "Should we have a natter?" And then people would have a chat and just. And I see that fundamentally, if more people could do that now. In today's society, we call it emotional intelligence or soft skills, etc. I just call it good human behaviour. Why don't we just go and ask if someone's not themselves, how are you? Because there could be loads of things going on in their home life that they just need that help with, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I've got a radar for that, Stephen. Me.
Yeah.
I'm, ooh, not sure about that answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll have to kind of step
Yeah.
in and have a little. We call it Hangout because we're on the Google platform, so it is literally a hanging
Yes.
out
Hang
kind
out. Yeah.
of messenger, and you
Yeah.
can do a video link, and I'll say, "Oh, we've got 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Let's have a
Yeah.
catch up and chat," because I know there's hierarchy, Stephen, and I know that it has got its place and it's important. There's
Yeah.
leadership required. I take that, responsibility and accountability fully.
Yeah.
Um, but I also see that as being a privileged position, and I'm not really any different from anybody else,
Yeah.
human. And
Yeah.
so I want to kind of, I still highly value that connection
Yeah.
and being able to provide some encouragement and support where necessary.
Yeah. And just before I go into my last question was about the word privilege. I strongly believe being a leader is a privilege. And it's a very good privilege to be in. So I just echo your comments there about being a privileged person, because I think looking after and supporting people is a real privilege. So I think great connection.
And a great responsibility, Stephen.
Yes. Yeah.
So, along with that privilege, there can be times when, again, that step back is required.
Yes.
It's a privilege, and it's a
Yeah.
privilege for everybody.
Yes.
So, you do need to kind of think through around that level of accountability because it's big. So, along with the
Yeah.
privilege comes accountability.
Yeah, no, and I think the bit there is I said to someone recently that leaders take the paycheck for the good times and the bad times. They don't just take the paycheck for just I'm a good leader, because a good leader deals with those issues or moments of truth and actually come out positively with that person, and kind of go head on to those rather than avoiding them as well.
Absolutely. And sometimes that means where, either you or an organization or whatever needs to say, well, I'm really sorry we got that wrong. And
Yeah,
I think that's part of authenticity. And that's part of building trust as well,
yeah,
where we're not so busy trying to hide something that didn't
yeah,
work well, that
yeah,
actually, it coming out the other side, sort of like a little bit of a bombshell, as a,
yeah.
that's not helpful.
No,
And actually, it reduces trust. And I think one thing
yes,
that's important, certainly for public sector organisations, is to kind of have a belief in the trust
yeah,
that, as we all know, sometimes things don't go well.
yeah,
Sometimes they haven't gone quite the way
yeah,
you would like it to. But again, isn't that an opportunity for learning and change and
yeah,
kind of supporting, and those things can be done in a positive
yeah.
way. I know
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And I think the bit there is if you sweep things under the carpet, it will always come out.
Oh yeah.
Whereas actually in any organisation, private sector, public sector, not for profit, etc., it's better to kind of put your hand up and go. There's going to be a kind of a bit of annoyance to start with, but people will go, "We respect you for doing that." That I've
Yeah,
noticed.
and I do think that's one of the, that's one of my guiding principles is around um that openness around. I don't know whether we got this right. In fact, I don't think we did in some
Yeah.
circumstances. I'm not saying I've done anything wrong. I'm just saying
Yes.
these are just the fundamental
Yeah.
principles that I have. That let's have a conversation about it, because the last thing you want to do is to try and hide something. And going back to parenting, my mother would say, and she'll continue to say it, I'm sure, until we have other things that we may sort of take over, but very similar sort of saying to what you've just said, Stephen, and that is, whatever's going on in the dark will come to light.
Yeah.
And I think that's very true. So for me, whatever I do believe that I want to be proud of that and
Yeah.
able to stand up to it,
Yeah.
and look myself in the
Yes.
mirror. It's not just about what it means to other people, it's very much about what it means to me,
Yeah.
and equally what therefore it means to
Yeah.
my family, really. What
Yes.
does that
Yeah.
represent? It's important.
Yeah, no, it's very, very important. I can see that from yourself and
Yeah.
how you've come across today. So, just last question before I let you go. What's kind of your personal development you're working on in 2023 or taking forward?
So I'm going back out to run. So
Yeah,
that's it, and I know that's sort
yeah,
of in terms of the kind of formality training. I have joined a leadership program that's run by Government's Commercial Services and an organisation called Ventures Green. That will conclude this year. It's been really good. I've enjoyed that. I do think there are other things in the pipeline, but until I kind of start my role in
yes,
probably wouldn't be able to
yeah,
kind of confirm those at the moment. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of networking. There'll be a lot of conferences and things like that that I
yeah,
will be attending. there'll be probably a lot of sessions of speaking and talking and
Yeah,
being out in communities where I really
yeah,
enjoy. So
yeah,
looking forward to that coming up
yeah,
for in the next year too.
yeah,
I'll learn a lot from them. That's what
yeah,
that's what I'd
yeah.
say, even.
And there's a good balance there of not of on-job learning and people learning and community makes you feel good. And then there's also, you said about your leadership development, that you're keeping going to keep, because I
Yeah,
always believe that you keep learning. You can get some real buzz, and it doesn't matter how old you are. If you keep learning, you just experience new things.
yeah. I'm sure that Hackney community is going to have a lot to teach me, and I'm there to
Yeah,
learn
yeah, wonderful.
and to connect with them. Of course, I'm looking forward to it, and I'll miss Kingston
Yeah,
dearly.
yeah.
It's a fantastic borough too. Absolutely amazing. I've been lucky.
No, and from my point of view, I just want to say a big thank you for today.
Thank you.
We've gone through our question. I feel as though we could chat all day, Sandra, you and I. So I just want to say a huge thank you. Please connect with Sandra Farquharson on LinkedIn if you kind of from that perspective. But I just want to say a huge thank you, and I look forward to speaking to you soon, Sandra. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Stephen. Most appreciated.